as a principal difference, then that's your prerogative.
That's on you.
Hi, Miss Kenzie.
Hello, Kenzie.
I actually don't think I've ever had you on my live. I see you in other lives, but I don't think I've
Kenzie,
ever...
did you create that app?
Mm-hmm.
Kenzie, did you create that app that we were talking about before? That you owe me royalties?
I don't remember what you're talking about, Andy.
Oh. I just remember us talking about an app, and I made a suggestion. You were like, I'm going to make that app, but I'm not going to pay you royalties. I think it was about like finding like some kind of dating app. We talked about it a while ago. Oh,
I have no recollection of that. So sorry.
I just remember you owe me royalties on it. I don't remember the specifics.
Show me the contract.
Anyway.
Show me the legal obligation.
Oh, I like her already.
Yeah, I don't know how long you've been here, Kenzie, but I just feel like I've just been going in circles. So if you want to...
Well, I guess I don't understand Andy's argument. Is it that like biological resources and material resources, there's no principal difference?
Well, the resources themselves are obviously different, and how they're delivered to the child is different. But the principle of having to provide resources in both scenarios, that's what I'm asking. What's different about that?
So are you essentially saying that there's like a parental obligation?
Wait, no, that wasn't anything that we were talking about. We both agree that you have to provide resources outside of utero. So I'm asking what the difference is in having to provide resources in utero as well. Not the resources themselves, not how they're delivered, but the principle of being required to provide resources. Because he's saying that we can't require somebody to remain pregnant because that would be forcing them to provide these resources to this child against their will. But he's telling me outside of utero, I have to provide resources to this child against my will.
I see. So in this, obviously there's like a jurisprudential setting in these scenarios. There's a state. So? There's a state to enforce legality. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
There is a state in place to where they can enforce legality. They can enforce legal laws.
Yeah,
so I would argue that essentially, if there is a state, would you agree that the state has like an active interest in caring for children?
Well, I think the state's only responsibility is to protect the rights of us. Certainly the most vulnerable. Like, it's the most important that we protect their rights.
Okay. So would you say that like a surrogate has any responsibility to transfer an infant to another person's care?
Sure. I don't know what this has to do with what we were talking about, though. Like, now are you like trying to get into the whole like where this obligation comes from to begin with?
No, I'm just asking, like, are you warranting this framework under parental obligation?
I mean, it could be warranted under a bunch of different things. Like, we haven't even like dove deep into our stances on either side.
Well, you said something about
obligation
at this point. Hold on, I'm just asking at this point what the principal difference is in having to provide resources, because he's telling me that I have to do this outside of utero, whether I want to or not. And he can say it's because of parental, causal, whatever principle he wants to use, but he's telling me outside of utero I have to do this.
So, and we acknowledge that these obligations can be transferred.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That's where the disconnect is, because the procedure of like revoking the consent or revoking the resources that you are providing or obligated to provide for this child is a process. We have a procedure to ensure the safe transfer of ownership or safe transfer of this child.
There are exceptions.
Yeah.
Within 3 months of birth, you can actually drop a child at the hospital or a firehouse with no paperwork, no nothing, completely anonymous, to ensure that the child is still safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you agree with safe? Do you agree with safe haven laws, Andy?
Sure.
Okay. So I would argue that if we're going to have some kind of parental obligation established, I think essentially the obligation would need to warrant that every parent or entity can complete the tasks required. So I think that would be essentially outside of pregnancy and any kind of biological donation, because obviously not every person would match a person's biological organs or blood type. In the event that someone gave birth outside of a hospital setting, I would say that then at that time, the child would become a ward of the state. And if the person in possession of the child didn't want to be charged with kidnapping, they would need to transfer essentially the ward back to the state.
Wait, did you say that all children are wards of the state?
If the parent hasn't essentially made a contract with the state or an agreement with the state to take on these obligations, they don't have the parental obligations. So in the event that a child is born, they would be a ward of the state in that instance. And yes, the person would need to transfer the child back to the state because they would be in possession of the state's child, essentially.
Wait, why would I have to transfer it? Why would I have to do anything for this state property that I didn't consent to having in the first place?
Well, you're in possession of it.
So I didn't do anything to become in possession of it?
Sure you did. You've been in possession of it. You don't have any obligation to take care of it. You just need to essentially transfer custody, possession.
So me transferring it back would be an obligation.
If you don't want to be charged with kidnapping.
Well, how did I kidnap it? I didn't take it from anywhere.
Because it's a ward of the state. Home.
Wait, it didn't exist prior to me giving birth to it, right?
If it didn't exist, then it didn't have any rights? Wait, if it didn't exist, then it doesn't have any rights? Is that right?
According to you, it didn't exist, right, until I gave birth to it.
No,
right?
I didn't say that.
Okay, so then we can take it back to conception. It didn't exist prior to conception, right? So I never took it from the state. So how am I giving it back to the state if the state never had it to begin with?
Well, you're in possession. Like, if there is no one who has actually claimed the parental rights or the parental obligation of the child, then it automatically defaults to the state. If you are in possession of the child, i.e. pregnant, and you give birth...
Why would it default to the state?
Who else would it default to? You said the state has an active interest in preserving the rights of the child.
I mean, it could be nobody. Why would it default to the state?
Because we're in a scenario where if no one has, we're in a society where if no one has parental rights or obligations to a child, it is the state.
Wait, who says that nobody has parental obligations to this child? I don't agree to that.
You pretty much did.
That's the framework that we're setting. Then what creates an obligation?
I don't agree to that. That's like this weird scenario that you're creating.
I would say that any kind of parental obligation needs to be opted into, even if I do say that the pregnant person has a parental obligation. Again, I don't think it would include pregnancy because that's not something that every parent can provide to the child. And if we acknowledge that we can transfer these obligations, then in order for someone not to commit fraud within the contract, they would need to have the same obligations per the parent.
Wait, but I never entered into this contract to begin with.
Oh my God. I'm saying, like if I had a child and I gave birth to it and I raised it, you would still say I could put it up for adoption, correct?
Sure.
So then if I transfer my obligation to another person, would I be obligated to give it, any blood, bodily fluid, or organs?
Hold on. In that statement, you're assuming that you had the obligation to begin with and that you transferred it to somebody else who was willing to take it on.
Correct. I wanted to finish my example.
Yeah, so I'm asking you.
I'm asking you, though, if I transfer it, 1 second. No, let me finish my example.
Well, you started asking me another scenario in the middle of me asking you a question.
No, I'm asking you this question so that I can understand. I was in the middle of asking
you a question, and you
Andy, you have a habit of cutting people off. Maybe let her finish what she was saying, because you do have a habit of cutting people off.
Let her finish the statement that she made while she was interrupting what I said.
She wasn't finished talking. You literally just cut her off. Maybe just let her finish what she was saying, because you've been cutting everybody off.
Yeah, we don't have to pick hairs about who's interrupting you. Everyone's interrupting everybody. It's the nature of TikTok. Let's just try and keep a semblance of a back and forth. So if Kenzie is asking a question, she was beginning to lay out an example, and then followed up with a question. Let's just move forward from there. We don't have to pick hairs about who's interrupting who.
So Andy, if I give birth to a child, I take custody of the child, and then later on I put the child up for adoption. Someone adopts the child, and then later on the child needs blood, bone marrow or an organ. Do I have an obligation to provide that for the child?
No, you transfer that obligation to somebody else who was willing to take it on.
If I were still in custody, if I still had custody of the child, would I have an obligation?
If you haven't transferred that obligation to somebody else, sure.
Then I would have an obligation to provide blood, a kidney, and bone marrow?
Yep.
Right. So at that point, since you're acknowledging that it's transferable and I no longer have this obligation to provide bodily resources, then why can't a pregnant person transfer the obligation to the state?
Well,
while they're pregnant and therefore no longer provide bodily resources.
Yeah, because they can't do so without killing the child or putting it at greater risk. If there was a way to do that, then sure, go ahead. But they can't.
If you're acknowledging that a transfer can occur, then I would argue that in order for the person who is taking the child under their custody, it would have to follow the same guidelines that we give to the other parents, because the new parent, if they're not a bone marrow match, if they're not a blood match, cannot fulfill the terms of the parental obligation that the previous parent could.
Wait, just because you're the parent doesn't mean that you're a match for all of these things regardless.
Right. So I would say that any kind of obligation that we construct.
So does that mean that the original parent wouldn't have any obligation to it either because they can't match all of these things?
That's my whole point. Yes. Is that when it comes to constructing a parental obligation.
So nobody has any obligation to anybody because we can't fulfill all of these things?
No. When we talk about a parental obligation, we have to have only obligations that any caregiver could fulfill, which I would argue. Because if you transfer obligations that other people can't fulfill, they're in breach of contract.
No, they're not.
Because they are. They can't fulfill them. Why should someone else have more obligations than another person?
They're not taking on an obligation that they are going to be a bone marrow transplant match or a kidney match. They're taking on the obligation that they're going to do everything that they can to take care of this child and do everything in the child's best interests. That's the obligation that they're taking on.
We would need specifics. We would need specifics on what is able, because if a parent is poor and they're unable to provide food, correct? You would say that they are in violation of their parental obligation and therefore the child should be removed, correct?
Wait, no, I wouldn't say they're in violation of their parental obligation just because they are poor. Like poor people.
Well, they can't provide food, Andy. Their child is starving.
Yeah, so they should go out and seek help. Sure.
If they can't?
What do you mean if they can't go out and seek help?
Correct.
Why would they not be able to go out and seek help?
Because you live in the woods.
Sure. So if they can't go out and seek help, then how are they going to transfer this child to somebody else? Like your scenario is kind of self-defeating.
I'm just saying, wouldn't the state then come in and act in the best interest of the child because the child is starving?
Well, in that case, wouldn't the state come in and provide the resources to them?
Not necessarily.
No, they
Why not?
They would take them.
Wait, why not? Wait, if the state has resources to provide to them and they can come and take the child, why couldn't they provide those resources instead?
It's cheaper.
You said that's not the state. You said that's not the state's obligation. Their only obligation is to protect the rights.
Yeah, you said that there was no way for them to get any of this assistance. So if there's no way for them to get any of this assistance, then how is somebody going to get to them?
Assistance is not necessarily within the framework, because I don't even know. Like, are you opposed to like state-funded assistance like that?
State-funded? I would be against, state-funded. I think it should be like more private charities, sure.
Great. So then by your own framework, the state would not be obligated to provide that assistance. They would just go in to protect the rights of the child.
I didn't say the state was obligated. You said there was no way for them to get assistance. If there's no way for them to get assistance, then how is somebody going to have a way to get there to take the kid?
Assistance in terms of providing sustenance, or providing food.
Sure. So you're saying there's no way for anybody to get to them to provide sustenance for this kid, but somehow somebody can get there to take the kid?
The parent is unable to provide them with food. Should the state come in
I understand that, and I said that they should go out and seek resources, and there are resources available for this. And you said they're unable to go out and seek resources.
I just said they're unable to provide food.
So if they're unable to get resources, then how is somebody going to get to them in order to take the child?
They would go to the home.
Right. In the same way that somebody would go to the home to provide the resources to them.
Right, but that's not an action of the parent. I'm just giving you a scenario where another resource they are not providing. Should the child be removed?
Sure. And so if they need these other resources and they're not getting them, then the state should go and remove the child and give it to somebody else who is able to provide these resources.
So you acknowledge that because they aren't able to provide the basic resources of food, then they should be removed. If they're not able to provide the resources of blood, organs, or bone marrow, why shouldn't they be removed?
Wait, the state would do the same thing. The state would go around and see if there's anybody that can provide this resource as well and see if they could get it to them.
They wouldn't transfer the child to that person.
Wait, they would try to do the same thing.
No, they wouldn't.
A lot of faith in the state.
The state wouldn't automatically go in and take the child if they could just give them a sandwich.
I don't think blood donations and bone marrow lists and kidney lists are state ran.
Yeah, so these organizations are going to try to find a match for this child regardless. They're going to try to find a match for any of these needs.
Right. They're going to find someone else to fulfill the obligation, wherein the food, the child would be removed. But if they were not able to find blood, find bone marrow, the child would not be removed.
Okay, so to be clear, if your child needs a bone marrow transplant and you're not a match, you think the state should come and take that child from you and give it to somebody else who's a match?
No, but I feel under your framework.
Wait, why not? Why not?
Because I don't think that bodily resources like blood, bone marrow, and organs parents should be forced to donate. I think that falls outside of any kind of parental obligation.
Sure. So what resources should be required?
Any basic resource that we think any person can provide. Just literally the fundamentals of what a parent would be required to provide.
Such as?
Food, clothing,
shelter.
Okay,
water.
So why would a parent or a mother not be required to provide those food nutrients to the child in utero?
I wouldn't, because those are her bodily resources. It's not a material entity, it's bodily resource. Because I can't transfer my pregnancy to someone else, can I?
Wait, but if I live in the middle of nowhere and nobody can get to me, I can't transfer that child to somebody else either.
Correct.
Okay, so if nobody can transfer, if I can't get this child to someone else, then am I not obligated? I don't have to take care of it. I can just starve it to death if I feel like it, because nobody can get to me to take care of it or to transfer to somebody else.
You have not. No, you do have the obligation for it to be transferred, because again, if you haven't claimed the parental obligation, then it is a ward of the state.
That's not what I just asked you. I live in the middle of nowhere. Nobody can get to me. I have plenty of food to take care of everybody who would ever want to come here, but nobody can get to me. Since I'm not able to transfer this child to somebody else, does that mean I can starve it? I don't have to provide it resources?
No,
because nobody else can take care of it.
You would still be charged with kidnapping.
But nobody else can take care of it, so I don't have to take care of this kid, right?
Because that's what you're telling me for the state.
Hold on, that's what you're telling me for the pregnant person, though. You're saying that the mother doesn't have to provide these resources. She can actually actively end the child's life, not just cut off the resources. She can end the child's life because nobody else can take care of this child. It can't be transferred safely to somebody else in utero.
I'm saying that obligation is outside of a parental obligation.
Yeah, but then I give you this scenario, the exact same thing. It's just the child is already born. So the child is born, but it's unable to be transferred to somebody else. Why am I not able to cut off my resources and starve it?
But no, that's not our framework, Andy. Our framework is that it can be transferred. We agree that parental obligations. We agree that parental obligations can be transferred. And when it comes, when you opt in, or if they never opted into a parental obligation, then I don't care if anyone can't get to them. They are still a ward of the state. And if the person who has possession kills a ward of the state, then they can be charged with kidnapping, so on and so forth.
Cool. So that's the distinguishing
difference.
Then that should also apply in utero.
Because again, when it comes to the obligations that anyone needs to fulfill, it is outside of bodily resources.
Wait, anybody could fulfill that though. Anybody could fulfill that, right? If we were able to transfer it to somebody else's uterus, they could fulfill that.
If we could, great.
Yeah, and my whole scenario is
we can't.
And my whole scenario is I'm somewhere with my child that nobody can get to, so I'm not able to transfer it to somebody else.
Because you're stuck on this providing resources.
If you're accessible where no one can go, then how would anyone know this child even existed?
Wait, so if nobody knows it exists, then I can just do whatever I want to it? Then that would apply.
We're not talking about moral framework. We're talking about legal framework. And I'm saying you have a legal obligation if you are in possession of a ward of the state to turn it back over to the state.
Right, but then you
are not
only if
this child needed a blood transfusion, you would not be able to.
Yeah, so then you just said if nobody knows about it. Then you just said if nobody knows about it, then it wouldn't matter, right? So if nobody knows about my child, I can do whatever I want to them. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, we have to act within this scenario that there is a state. Because again, if there's no state, then who's stopping me from getting an abortion?
Wait, just because there would be nobody to punish me for it, or I wouldn't be able to be found guilty of it, doesn't mean that the act would still not be wrong.
We're not talking about morality, Andy. We're talking about legality. What are the legal obligations?
Is it not still illegal to commit a crime even if nobody knows that you did it?
It is, yes.
Okay, so then you just debunked your own stance and everything you've been saying.
No, I didn't.
If in this scenario, if you're out in the middle of the woods and the distinction that I think that is just being missed is you would not be obligated under any pretense to donate your blood or transfer your blood to this baby to sustain its life. That is in no way.
Why not? Why not? Because she's telling me that if anybody else can do it, then I should have to do it.
If anyone else can do it, then I should have to do it.
I'm saying it's essentially the standard should be what we provide as the basic needs that any parent can fulfill. Not every parent can fulfill a blood transfusion.
And not every parent can fulfill basic food necessities.
A kidney. Then you agree that they should not have possession. They should not have the parental responsibility of the child.
No, I would say they should get help from private charities or other people to fulfill these things that they can't fulfill themselves. Doesn't mean we should come and take their children away just because they're poor.
To give birth,
doesn't mean we should take people's children just because they're poor. That's a weird take.
Andy, in your scenario, if I'm obligated to give blood to this child to keep it alive, let's just say that my blood is not a match to their blood. Sure. And it actually becomes toxic to them, and then they unalive as a result of that blood transfusion.
So go out and find
I was obligated to.
So go out and find a blood match.
No, but we're in the middle of the woods. You've already created the framework. We're in the middle of the woods. You don't have access to society. You're on your own. You have this obligation to provide your bodily resources.
Yeah, if we're in the middle of the woods, I'm not able to provide a blood transfusion even if I am a match.
Why not?
Because I don't have the tools nor the education to provide a blood transfusion.
But you're obligated to in your framework.
Wait, I would be obligated to do everything that I'm able to that's in the best interest of the child.
Okay, and that would be, to Kenzie's point, anything that would be the things that anybody can provide.
Why?
Then couldn't I just say that I'm not able to continue the pregnancy?
If you're not physically able and it's a medical necessity, I would agree that you should be able to terminate the pregnancy.
No, because I just don't have the mental capacity.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a necessity. That wouldn't necessitate ending the pregnancy. There are other things that we could do.
Why not? You don't have the medical knowledge of performing a blood transfusion.
Sure. But in this scenario, you could have other people that could help. If you're in the middle of the woods and you don't have the ability to, then possibly.
Your own argument that you couldn't do the blood transfusion.
Right.
Like, along the lines of mental health, that
you're trying to be the Cowboys kicker or something. Like all these goalposts being moved. It's like you're trying to kick fucking field goals for the Cowboys.
Wait, what kicker moved the goalposts?
Sorry, David.
You said that if you were by yourself, you would not have the tools and the ability to continue the blood transfusion. And now when we apply that to pregnancy, you're like, oh, but someone could help you.
Sure. And if I'm in the middle of wherever by myself and I'm going to die, but for this other person, then yeah, you don't have to sustain this other life if it means your life is going to die. I agree.
Andy, are you pro-life or pro-choice?
He's pro-life.
I'm pro-life.
Can I ask your reasonings for pro-life? I'm not going to hate against pro-lifers.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll like say it real quick, but I really don't feel like restarting the entire debate. But yeah, it's just a human life from the moment of conception. It's deserving of the same rights as every other human life.
Okay. But even in this framework, we're not talking about the same rights as every other human life because me and you don't have positive rights.
Wait, we are
like other people's resources?
Wait, depending on the scenario, sure we do.
How?
Yeah, if I'm put in jail, like I absolutely have the positive right to resources. They have to feed and clothe me and shelter me while I'm in jail.
Yeah, but I mean, when you're in jail, you are actively like losing rights. So it's like that's like
sure, I lose some of my negative rights to freedom, and I gain positive rights to food, clothing, and shelter.
Yeah, and you and I aren't in jail. So it's like that's a completely different scenario. That's like
Wait, I agree, but you asked me for an example.
Because you and I do not have the same positive rights as children.
Edith, that's just mean.
That's just mean?
What the hell?
Edith. I was replying to one of the comments.
Oh. I was like, what?
If somebody, and I don't want the comments to be mean to either party. I mean, if you're out down there screaming Andy W, don't be crazy. If you're down there screaming Kenzie W, don't be crazy. That's just
fine. It's fine. It was a joke. I don't care what the comments say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just like these positive rights that you deem to be appropriate for a baby in your framework. You said that they are deserving of the same rights as every other person. Well, every other person on the planet does not have those same positive rights.
Wait, we all have the same rights? Yeah, we do. I would agree that some of our positive rights change depending on our circumstances. So, like, if I'm not able to care for myself because I'm in jail, like I can't go out and get my own food, clothing, and shelter, then the state is required to do that for me. My child is not able to go out and get its own food, clothing, and shelter. So
that's because by due process,
I have an obligation to take care of my child until they're able to take care of themselves. And again, like I said, I don't want to like restart this entire debate all over.
I know we're just going round and round. I can't. I don't know how to articulate it in a way where to show you the principal difference between materialized, like the way Kenzie said. I love that, like materialized resources versus bodily resources.
I would say that bodily resources are different because they're essentially an extension of your consciousness.
It's like the vessel of your consciousness. My body, my consciousness is irrelevant without my body. My body is irrelevant without my consciousness.
And yet you're going to require me to use my body to do things to take care of my kid, whether I want to or not.
No, that's not true. Only if you have opted into it. Only if you have opted into it.
No, I didn't opt into a cryptic pregnancy.
Then you just have the obligation to return the child to the state. Otherwise, you would be charged with kidnapping.
So then I am obligated to use my body and my resources to do something for this kid, even if I didn't opt into this obligation to begin with.
Not a parental obligation. It's not a parental obligation.
You can call it whatever you want.
Can I just say...
That's not an argument.
You can call it whatever you want. You're still requiring me to do the same things.
No, all we require you to do is transfer the child back over to the state.
What do you mean back over to the state? The state never had possession of this child to begin with.
Well, then transfer the child to the state.
Yeah, I don't know why I would be required to do that. You're asserting that I have some kind of obligation again.
Because you're in possession.
Why does that matter?
Why do
I have to take action
why does
and use my
matter?
resources? Why do I have to take action and use my resources to do anything to care for this child that I never opted into taking care of to begin with? If it's the state's property, they can come pick it up.
Stance, correct?
If you're saying it's the state's property,
you are in possession of the state's property.
Sure, the state can come pick it up if they want to. I don't know why I'm.
Then you have to. Then you have to notify the state.
Why? Why would I have to notify them?
Because the child.
I also don't agree that the state owns people or that anybody can own people, but I don't know why I would be obligated.
I'm talking in terms about an ownership, Andy. That's so disingenuous. Yeah, when we talk about parents having to care for their children, it's the same way as if the state were to take over.
Can I just say something? I just wanted to come on this live and just share my story and just voice my opinion. So in November, I had to make a really hard decision. I have had an abortion, and that was in November. I reached 4 months pregnant. I know people are going to be like, oh, you should have rolled out every option. The reason I reached 4 months is because I thought I could do it, and obviously my partner had every right to have a say, and he did. I listened to him and he listened to me, but unfortunately life was just going pretty fucking shit for me at the time. I had no job. I was about to get kicked out of my place because my landlord was a dickhead. It was the hardest decision, and I'm gonna say this now. I have had some symptoms from that pregnancy of 4 months that have not gone with me, like nausea. My appetite is just all over the place. I still wake up every morning like I did when I was pregnant. So that's why I say I understand why people are pro-life. I'm not going to hate anybody for it. I'm sticking with pro-choice because I made that choice, and I feel like everybody should have a choice with what they do, because it's traumatic, and I know it still traumatizes me to this day. I've never gotten over it. Of course, I had some hate. People were like, "Oh, you've murdered your child. Why have you done this? Oh, you're never gonna live with this decision." I've heard it all, but I'm not gonna hate anybody for being pro-life at all.
Donut, first off, let me tell you, huge hugs your way, sweetheart, because I can only imagine how difficult that choice was to make. And I definitely understand the idea of making the right decision for you. And it's not okay for people to come at you like that at all.
I've heard it all.
But you sharing your story definitely kind of pushes the idea that it, A, is a choice, and B, it is not one that is easy to come to.
I just sometimes don't feel like these comments that I see, people going, "Oh, it's murder." I know, I don't know. I don't know if I had a heartbeat at that time. When I was doing the abortion, we went to a scan, and they did say to me, "Do you want to see the scan?" And I don't know why, but I did, knowing what I went through. But I've got a little box, and I know a lot of people are like, "Oh no, you haven't. You're just saying, you know what you know, you're just saying this, blah blah blah. No, you haven't." I've got a little box with a certificate of life and a little bear. My partner carries one. It's upsetting because after the abortion, December started going up. I got a job in December. I'm now moved out with my partner. It's been nearly a month since we've been moved into our home. So, I do have some regrets for it, but I would never hate the decision I made. Obviously, at first I hated this decision. I was like, "Oh, fuck's sake, what have I done?" I burst into tears. Sometimes I say to my partner, I just get really guilty, and I'm like, I wish we never did. I wish I never made this decision. But I am still pro-life. I support both sides because everybody has their own opinion. You can't hate anybody for their opinion. I see both sides of things. I always look at it okay, fair enough, that's a good point. And I also see oh, okay, that's also a good point. So I guess
I think we can be critical because I'm sure you wouldn't want that access that you had to your healthcare removed, right?
Pardon, sorry.
I think we can be critical of the pro-life ideology because you just said you had access to healthcare so that you could make that choice. And I'm sure you don't want that access removed, right?
I did have that choice. For me, it's a lot different. I live in the UK, so it's a lot different for me down here. I did have all the access therapy. I had nurses calling me every week and discussing how I was feeling. I had like 2 phone calls, one before, like a week before, and then also one a week after, just to discuss how I am.
Right. So the point that I'm trying to make is that there is one side that is trying to remove that access so that you can't make that choice. And I think that is something that needs to be pushed back on. I think a lot within like the TikTok abortion debate atmosphere, it's really been reduced to like some kind of philosophical argument, because then that allows pro-lifers to ignore a lot of systemic issues that arise when abortion bans are implemented. If we want to really come up with common ground, that would be to reduce abortion. And the best comprehensive, pragmatic way to do that is through sex education K through 12, public funding of long-active reversible contraceptives, subsidized healthcare, subsidized daycare, paid parental leave, and a living wage. These are things that will actually have meaning. Abortion bans do nothing but subjugate and oppress women.
Well said, Kenzie.
Yeah, I mean,
I would agree that we all like should. First, I wanted to say to Donut, there's probably a lot that we disagree on, and there might be some stuff that we do agree on, but I would agree that like nobody should be attacking like the person themselves. We can talk about the arguments, but you said that you had received like a lot of like hateful comments towards you specifically, and I would agree that nobody should be doing that. We need to stick to the arguments.
So do you agree with the stigma against abortion, Andy?
So I totally disagree with abortion as a whole, but I'm just saying.
So do you think that women who get abortions should feel shame, guilt, disappointment, that they have essentially like murdered someone, that they should feel bad?
I can't control or say what somebody should feel based like on things that they experience or choose to do. But I think that all I'm saying is when we have these discussions, we need to focus on the argument itself and not like shaming people or making people feel bad for decisions that they might have made in the past.
So you disagree with the stigma against abortion, that women who get abortions shouldn't feel some kind of shame?
Well, again, I can't control what people feel.
Yeah, but you can control what you say. I'm not
asking you to control. I'm asking you like...
Yeah.
If shame should be a part, if there should be a stigma against abortion, because I think there are stigmas against, unaliving people. There is a stigma, and I don't even know if I'm using stigma correctly. I think there is a negative outlook on people unaliving people. There is a negative reaction to SA, especially when it comes to children, and that is very valid. I'm asking you if that's valid in the case of abortion.
Yeah, I mean, even a lot of people that are pro-life have had abortions previously. I don't think people should feel shame for different things that they've done in their past. If they've people make bad decisions a lot of times, and people have a lot of different reasons for doing it. Some of them we understand, some of them we don't understand as far as why people do it. But again, I don't think anybody should be shamed for things that decisions that they've made in the past. I think we need to focus on the argument itself and focus on, like you said, reducing abortions as a whole. Now, I would disagree with it being saying that we still need to keep it legal to begin with. I would say that we can focus on these things that would reduce abortions and the reasons that people would want them to begin with, but we shouldn't be allowing them to continue while we work to reduce them as a whole. If we say that it's a human rights violation, then we shouldn't say, okay, well, it's fine if you keep committing these human rights violations while we fix these reasons for why you want to commit the human rights violations. We need to stop the human rights violation.
It's not a human rights violation. I would say it's a human rights violation to deny someone health care.
Exactly.
Yeah. So obviously people on the pro-choice side don't think it's a human rights violation, or else you wouldn't be advocating for pro-choice. I'm interested in hearing why you think it's healthcare and how you define healthcare.
Dude,
healthcare is essentially medical.
United Nations stated that it was.
He's just going to stay appeal to authority.
No, I'm just going to say to all you pro-lifers, if I had any other decision or any choices, I rolled out every option. And I know you guys are going to say, oh, but you could have done adoption, or, I didn't want that. I did not want that.
Adoption is not a solution for abortion. It's a solution for parenthood. And I would say that abortion is healthcare because it is medical care for someone's physical or mental well-being.
I appreciate you sharing that, Donut. I mean, if anybody shames you, it's like that's more of a reflection on them and their privilege of never being forced into a decision like that. And it's like, and that has no place anywhere in the debate sphere. And it's disappointing that it is so prevalent, especially in the comment sections. But I appreciate you sharing that, because it's like sometimes the better road isn't always doing what you perceive to be like quote unquote good. Sometimes we have to make hard decisions with that just for the benefit of our life and our future and the success and your future kids. You know, it's like it's I never view abortion as a preferred or desirable outcome of a pregnancy, but I understand and I recognize that for a lot of people it is the best option for them, not only for their futures but also for their health. And so it's
not for the unborn.
You sharing that, Donut?
I would argue there's no harm.
And Donut, I'll tell you right now, if anybody else gives you shit, you send them my way, sweetheart. There is a reason they call me Mama.
Yeah, and to kind of get it back, Andy, when it comes to these like scenarios of like these babies out in the middle of the woods, we already have like reporting laws in place where even if I were to stumble across a baby in the middle of nowhere, I am obligated just as a member of society to report that baby because it is a ward of the state. That's the assumption when I find a baby out in the middle of the woods, to get it to the authorities. It's like, and all your obligation is to call 911. It's like,
should I be obligated to do that?
Yes. And that's just for the benefit of society, just for the well-being of others, because
I would say the benefit of society and the well-being of others, certainly the unborn, would be not to unalive them.
That's just objectively not true.
I think then you just get into begging the question of personhood.
Sorry, that comment, there's somebody that put Donut should feel shame. Okay, yeah, sure, right, cool.
I know I got a couple mods in here. I hope. I don't see it. So.
And just to kind of make a quick comment here, some of the comments that you're making, Andy, are seriously along the lines of the pro-life stance. And then you're also making it very clear that you care more about the unborn fetus than you do about living, breathing children that are already out of the womb.
Wait, hold on.
You can't care about one and not care about the other.
No, just to be clear.
If you're going to be pro-life.
So just to be clear, I am very much pro-life, and a lot of the statements I'm making is using your own logic to justify these other things and to show how they don't track, and your logic is inconsistent.
A lot of the things
that I said are not my stance.
You're arguing philosophy, not science and common sense.
Which is why I never see any pro-lifers just run live saying forced organ donation.
What?
When it comes to like the pro-life position, all pro-lifers in terms of like a philosophical argument are willing to die on the hill that parents should be forced to donate blood, donate bone marrow, donate organs. Essentially, that doesn't result in their death. Yet no one's running lives advocating for that. That's not a law. You're just dying on that hill so that you can remain logically consistent. Why are you advocating pro-life positions?
I don't care what the law is. We're talking about what it should be.
See, every time you say that there should be a law,
why are you not arguing that the law should force parents to give their kidneys, to give their blood, to give their bone marrow? Because right now that's not a law.
I do think it should.
But you don't run lives. You don't run lives trying to advocate for that. You just use that talking point so that you can remain logically consistent.
As I stated prior, every time you say there should be a law, there probably shouldn't be. I think there should be a law stating that men caught inappropriately touching somebody should automatically have their hands chopped off.
Okay.
Probably shouldn't be a law, though, right?
I don't know. Should it? Shouldn't it? You can make an argument for it, and we could discuss it.
Why
with abortion?
The goal should always be that less laws. I mean, let's be honest. Like we shouldn't need laws to be like civil society. They're put in place to encourage a more civil society and to protect the rights of the people within that society from people who wish them harm.
Yeah, it's including the unborn.
Yeah, but that's where we disagree.
Right. So you want to protect everybody in society except for the unborn. The most
the
vulnerable,
unborn are not in society.
Fully formed people need protection.
That is
Hunts themselves do not.
They're not imaginary.
But they're literally inside of a person that is in society.
They are just as much part of society as the rest of us.
How
based on what?
Like based on what? Yeah.
Based on them existing.
Okay, would you say the same about a leech on your arm?
I could argue that sperm and eggs are as much a part of society as us just by existing.
Sure, and you could try to argue that they're human organisms, but you'd be wrong.
Again,
why does it matter being a human organism?
Because that's what we're talking about, protecting the rights of human organisms.
Why?
Yes, but would you say the same thing about a leech on your arm?
Is a leech a human organism?
It doesn't matter. It is a life.
Well, it certainly does, because we just said that we're discussing protecting human organisms. We're not talking about leech rights. We're talking about human rights.
Well, when it becomes a fully formed human body,
When's that?
Third trimester.
Is that when it becomes fully formed?
That's when the brain, the nervous system, and the organs start to fully form to start becoming functional.
Start to fully form or are fully formed? And what do you mean start to fully form? Because I could say that you start to fully form from the moment you come into existence as a zygote. Just takes longer for you to get to the end.
You're a clump of cells at that point.
Sure, but you still start to fully form. Like, that's a pretty weird statement.
I'm talking what we refer to as a human being, what a human actually looks like, which means that fetus
so you have to look
having a head, arms,
so you have to
organs to where they can live outside of the uterus.
Right, Mama.
Until that fetus can survive outside of the uterus.
So now are you arguing viability?
Viability is 100% a thing.
I think viability and personhood.
I mean, I feel like it depends. Like, I feel we could have like several like pro-choice or personhood arguments. I'm more so concerned about the obligations that you're imposing on society. Because I have a belief, right, like from my ethical framework, that every member of society has a basic obligation to one another, because we are constructing such obligations, right? So societies can differ, and therefore the obligations within it are different. We can see in the United States like what we are expecting from people, and we are the ones that can make those decisions, like what obligations we should uphold or form. I think like asking, for example, to call like the police if you observe like somebody kidnapping somebody else is an obligation that we can impose on each other. But I still haven't really heard an argument onto why we should like impose the responsibility or obligation of pregnancy from you, Andy. Especially because you're a capitalist, right? Like I don't really know how you are creating any form of obligations.
Yeah, so we haven't really even dove deep into, like I said, either of our stance. We've been focusing on this obligation that the host was saying exists outside of pregnancy and the reasons why it exists outside of pregnancy, and asking why that doesn't also exist in utero for the exact same justification, the same reasoning.
Yeah, well, I don't think that was the statement was made. Like we're just talking about different types of obligations, right? Because I feel like this is this whole idea that every principle is absolute. Like when I say bodily autonomy, yeah, I can definitely say that I would expect, just like Kenzie stated pretty clearly, how other members of society can be a transferable source for this obligation, right? So picking up a child is an obligation that can be expected, right? And I don't think that if somebody, for example, has no arms, we would expect them to pick up their child. I think that's a pretty simple thing, like how we impose obligations on people.
Well, I don't know that I'm obligated to ever pick up my child, am I?
Well, I mean, that's what I said. Like, we have built like this social construct and this legal construct, and we can even say the moral construct of parental obligation, right? Like, we have established what duties need to be fulfilled. Just like I can probably point you to instances where you would be like, well, I don't think the mom has to provide that for the fetus, because you don't even believe that a mom has to provide death for the fetus, right? Like, if it's a medical necessity, then you wouldn't say that she has that obligation.
Sure, because they both have equal rights.
No, I don't think it's about equal rights, because I think the fetus then has also a right to life and the mom has too. So we are having a complete conflict of rights there when both are equal, but we're just probably focusing on the obligation that is existing. So you put a whole stop to the obligation too. You say at this point, the mom has no longer the obligation to fulfill pregnancy.
Right, because they both have the equal right to life. So the fetus doesn't have the right to end the mother's life. The mother doesn't have the right to end the fetus's life unless one is putting the other's life in imminent danger.
What if they are both dying?
Sure, if they're both dying, then the mother can do what she can to protect her own life. The fetus can do what it can to protect its own life. Most likely the mother's going to win because she's able to protect hers better than the fetus can.
I'm still not sure, because we have already established, like, even if the right to life begins at conception, right, and the mom has equal rights to that, like, I'm still not sure, like, why she wouldn't have to fulfill the obligation with death. Like, I don't think the obligation just dissolves all of a sudden if death plays into. Like, and I feel like I could, like, probably point you to other instances, and I was just trying to establish how you have limits within the obligation that you're expecting on people. You don't think that somebody has to sustain a pregnancy if their life is at risk, because that is going to be above an obligation or a responsibility that you would impose on a pregnant person.
Right. For the same reason, I don't need to let my toddler shoot me. Like, I can stop them from shooting me, even if the only way for me to do that is shooting them.
Exactly. So you have an understanding that if there is a conflict of rights, right, it depends on the obligation that is present that would allow somebody to do something versus not allow somebody to do something.
Right. And the limitation is if my life is in imminent danger.
Why is that only the limitation?
Because we both have the same right to life. So I don't have the right to take anybody else's life.
But you're still prioritizing it in that scenario.
So you
because
don't
the fetus's right is in imminent danger when an abortion is being
Sure, and the fetus has every right to do everything they can to protect their right. It's just that I'm stronger as the mother, and I can probably protect my life better than they can.
So now it's ability. I thought we were arguing what ought to. Now you're talking about like well, because the mother is a more able, more capable. It's like
don't pretend. Hold on.
Ought to.
Hold on. Don't pretend you're tracking here.
Okay, let me ask you this, Andy. So what if the fetus has like a 90% chance of survival because it's just simply stronger than the mom, and the mom has a 10% chance to survive? Do you think the mom has the right to terminate the pregnancy?
Sure, because the mom has the right to protect her life. So if if the fetus does, the fetus just probably isn't going to be able to do it.
But you said it's stronger. Like, when it's about strength, then I could probably point you to instances where the fetus was stronger, but you would still say that that's where the opposite.
So I have a better chance. I have a better ability to protect my life as the mother than the fetus would inside of me. As I do, but I'm probably going to be able to end its life more than it's going to be able to end my life, and I'm only justified in doing that if it's putting my life in imminent danger.
So we're seeing that if there's a conflict of rights, that the survival chance is the determining factor who gets to defend their rights. What?
No, I actually just said the opposite of that.
Then I'm not tracking, Andy, because I feel like you just like putting a stop to the obligation, because the only reason why you can justify being pro-life is that you have this idea that there's an obligation present, right? Because I can point you to so many instances where we both have a right to life, but there's simply merely an obligation present, which would allow me to have like some sort of claim over your rights or whatever. Just like when I don't have a claim over your organs because you clearly don't think that you have a parental obligation towards me, correct?
Yeah, you don't have a claim over my organs.
Okay, so this is what I'm trying to establish. I still have rights just like you do, right? And there's a conflict of rights.
So I can't unjustly aggress upon you, the same as you can't unjustly aggress upon me.
Right.
If you are putting my life in imminent danger, then I am justified in ending your life.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
it doesn't mean that you don't have the right to life. It's just that you're putting my life in imminent danger, and I don't need to self-sacrifice so that you can live.
So you just don't believe in self-sacrifice.
The same would be extended to the pregnancy.
Exactly, and that's why I'm asking, like, the self-sacrifice, I can also apply to the pregnancy as a whole, because you are sacrificing parts of your body, you're letting a fetus occupying an organ of yours for 9 months, and you're also giving your calcium, resources, nutrients, progesterone, that you can agree that was yours before.
Yes.
So, hold on.
Yes.
So you
but you're saying a lot of things that are irrelevant.
Wait, Andy, really quick. So you do believe in self-sacrifice, but you putting the stop to death. What? You're not sacrificing your bodily autonomy during this? Like,
all we're talking about here is sacrificing your life. You each have the equal right to life.
So you
in utero, outside of utero, everyone has the same right to life.
Sure.
I don't have to let you shoot me in order for you to live. You can try to shoot me instead so that you can live and I can't.
So we agree.
But I don't have to allow myself to die so that you can live. Same things applies to the pregnancy.
Sure. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. It just seems like to me that at some point you no longer believe an obligation exists. Am I right?
The parental obligation or whatever is in the best interest. I'm not saying the obligation goes away. What I'm saying is that you don't have to self-sacrifice your life for somebody else.
Okay,
you have just as much right to life as the other person.
So let me ask you this one more time, Andy. So Andy, let me ask you this one more time. You do believe that there's an obligation present, right? And that the mom and the fetus both have equal rights. But at some point, you have decided that the obligation no longer has to be fulfilled because you don't believe in self-sacrifice, correct?
You don't have to end your life in order to save somebody else's life.
Okay, cool.
Just so like outside of utero, there's obligations. You have to provide resources to your children.
Then we agree that
you don't have to die for them.
Then we agree that there is a limit within an obligation, that not everything necessary has to be expected from another individual in order to grant another person's obligation or to fulfill an obligation. So that's simply what I'm trying to assess here, because I do believe that there is an obligation present in utero, and I'm simply not convinced why death has to be the point where you have to give up your right to liberty, freedom, your reproductive rights, and your bodily autonomy. And I have not heard a convincing argument for that.
Sure. And we would have to get back into the entire argument. But like I said before, I'm not interested in restarting the entire debate.
Okay. So, sure.
Where do you go from here, Andy? If you're not interested in getting into and dissecting your position, then.
Well, I'm not interested in restarting the entire debate. So, I mean, if there's any thing that you wanted to clarify, we can go over that. But
maybe we can do it some other time.
Again.
Yeah, sure. Maybe we can do it some other times. I was just trying to present and show that in every single scenario, we cannot talk about absolutes, just like we don't talk about obligations in absolute. You're applying a principle. You say, oh, you believe in bodily autonomy, therefore you can just starve your child. I would disagree with that, because we can stipulate the obligations present in society, which are constructed by us as a society, and that goes for every single individual. And I think Kenzie presented it really clearly, what obligations are present to each member of society, and it depends solely on the connection or the relationship that you have with them. So if you have the relationship of a parental figure or parental obligation, that will look really differently as me as a bystander seeing a child being abducted. And if you didn't opt into the parental obligation, you still would have an obligation to transfer that child back to the state. And I don't see how that is so hard to comprehend.
Yeah, except Kenzie's whole framework requires a state to be in place. And I would say that all of these rights exist and these obligations are the same whether there's a state or not.
How so?
How so? We don't have the right to unjustly aggress upon somebody else or kill somebody else for no reason.
Yeah, but those are negative rights.
Or not.
Well, and
where do positive rights exist with no state?
Yeah, Andy, you're just begging the question now. I feel like you just
wait. How am I begging the question?
Well, you're just saying that they're there. I don't really see them. I observe them within our society, and I can make
because these rights are inherent regardless of whether our government exists or not. Just like we have different governments around the world, right? They all have different rules and things. The rights that each human has is the same whether each individual government recognizes them or infringes upon them.
I disagree slightly with you. So I would say...
Wait, you disagree? So then...
we can definitely talk about the existence of negative rights. Like, I feel like a state is like definitely there to recognize those rights. But we were simply referring to the positive rights, and those are definitely socially constructed and are dependent on the society that we're in. Because if we were to live, for example, in a socialist country, let's just pretend, and we have finally the utopia that I so begging and wish for, then we would say that there is a positive inherent right to housing, to food. So we have constructed rights, and we can observe them, that those obligations that the state would have.
No, because rights don't come from government, right? You don't have rights just because government say you do.
Rights. Did I say negative or positive rights, Andy?
You said positive rights, and I believe that. I believe that they're one and the same.
What? Why?
Because you can't have the negative right to life as a child without the positive right to resources.
Okay, so where do they come from?
They're inherent.
How? You don't have to have a meta-ethics.
In the same way that the negative rights are inherent.
Oh, so it's just like a pivot right now, because I mean we don't have to have a meta-ethics discussion. Like I'm not really sure, but if you make the claim that something is inherent to us, right? Like I feel like it's way easier to just say I'm observing that we're just granting those rights as a society, and that it's just simply based on the things that we are building and the obligations.
Well, sure, but then you would have to concede. But then you would have to concede that if society grants other rights or rights to some people and not others,